Good evening, everybody. We always make a joke at the beginning of these events that we start on time. We're actually starting a minute early. Can you believe it? A literary venue starting a minute early. Good thing it's not a jazz club. It'd be starting 45 minutes late. Wait. Thank you so much for coming today. The first thing we want to do is thank and praise our Kelly Writers House fellow, Nathaniel Mackey, who's come a long way to be with us and has already spent a bunch of time with us today and will be back tomorrow. So let's give a big Philly welcome back to Nathaniel Mackey. Glad you're warming up your hands, because there's going to be an awful lot of thanking and praising Nate tonight and tomorrow. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we'll be back. There's a brunch, big full brunch. You don't have to do your own breakfast at home. And then at 10:30, Nate and I will be at a table here with a couple of mics, and we'll have what we hope will be a free exchange of ideas and comments and questions, including your questions. So that runs from 10:30 until like right at 11:30, been an hour, so that you can feel like you can get on with your day. So, you know, you can count on us. You can count on us if you're leaving work to come for an hour, maybe an hour and 5 minutes. And after tonight's reading and also tomorrow's discussion, we will have some of Nate's books available for sale. Emily Harnett, they are in the back. I didn't look. Okay. And I'm going to guess we've got the brand new book, Late Arcade, which is just a couple of weeks out from New Directions. And I'm also going to guess that we have the volumes 1 through 3 of From a Broken Bottle. Emily, you're supposed to be nodding. Yes? And I'm going to guess we also have probably Nod House. You've got Blue Fossa. Splay, Anthem, and Blue Fasa. So Blue Fasa is the most recent of the books other than chapbooks. And Splay Anthem, of course, won the National Book Award. And we have these. And Nate, for a certain amount of time tonight, there's a limit to that. We'll be able to inscribe your copy. So if you, there's a limit only in a matter of time, not a limit of his capacity to sign or inscribe. The literacy runs out at about 8 o'clock. In any case, so you'll get the mic in a second, Nate. In any case, he'll inscribe your copy happily, and then tomorrow as well. So there are a couple of seats, a few, open tomorrow. Fans of free and open to pen people and to the community programs, always at the Writers House, no card swipe at the door. We're just really glad that everybody can come. And Paul Kelly is largely responsible for that. So can we put our hands together for Paul Kelly? So I'll get off in a second. This afternoon, Nate spent 3 hours with the Kelly Writers House Fellows Seminar, which is something we do every spring. We have 3 eminent writers come. Nate is the second of the 3. In April, Lydia Davis will be here. So after reading 700 or 800 pages of Nate Mackey, we're going to turn to the short stories of Lydia Davis, and she'll be here at the end of April. We're just really glad that the Writers House Fellows program always begins with 3 hours with the students who've been really working on this. And I guess it warms us all up. And Nate was amazing in class, and I'm happy to tell you how amazing it was later. But right now, what I want to do is give the microphone over to Maya Arthur, who's to Lily first. Okay. Lily's got a gift for Nate, and then Lily will introduce Maya, who's going to do an introduction of Nate, and that sounds very elaborate. And here we go. Thank you very much for coming. And here's Lily. And by the way, Lily coordinates this whole thing. It wouldn't happen without Lily Applebaum.
I'm going to take this out. Thank you. I just quickly wanted to come up and represent the Writers House Fellows Seminar and present Nate with a special small gift. I, along with my colleague Henry Steinberg, printed a letterpress small letterpress poster of one poem from Nod House. It's called Ghost of a Trance. And we had a lot of fun picking the poem that we would represent on a broadside. This one felt very relevant because there's phrases like wrong note and talking of ghostly trances and presences, and those are relevant in the writing, but also very relevant to printmaking. Make ghost copies of prints, and letters sort of appear and disappear and leave traces, trances. So for a lot of reasons, it was really exciting to print this poem, and I'm gonna present Nate with the first in this limited run, but you can also pick up your own copy back on the table in the alcove where we're also selling books. And these are all hand set type and printed on our letterpress printer here at the university. So Nate, this is for you, and I hope that you feel like we've adequately represented your poem.
More than adequate.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. So good. I'm glad. I can also hang on to it if you don't want to
Yes, hang
just
on.
hold it. Yeah. Okay, great.
Because I'll lose it.
Okay, good. Thank you. So now I'd like to bring Maya Arthur up. She is a student in the Writers House Fellow Seminar. She's going to give Nate a proper introduction, and we're all very excited. So, Maya.
Hello? Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. In Splay Anthem, at the end of Song of the Andoumboulou, 46, Nathaniel Mackey writes, "It was a tale told many times over, muttered under one's breath unintended. All the songs had long been sung." While all the songs might have long been sung, Mackey, throughout his writing, has found a way to create those songs into words, a continuous experiment and improvisation on sound and the sound. You feel the sound, Mackey sound, from Splay Anthem to Nod House to Blue Fasa to even his prose work, such as Bedouin Hornbook. It is the sound that encompasses generations and diasporas, the sound that cycles one back in constant movement and constant thinking. There is no end, only passage, whether it is a passage back to an original form, to an original song, or even a passage that transcends into something new, but just as familiar. Mackey journeys in his writing. There is a coarseness and rambling in these journeys, just like in the improvisation of music itself. He keeps words on an edge, literally and figuratively. His estrangement of words leaves them on the edge of the page. His words leave the reader on an edge of understanding, but wondering, almost speculating about more. Who are the travelers in his serials? Why are they on this journey? Is this real, fiction, or simple mythologizing? What you understand in the writing is that they must move, and we must move along with them. Mackey's words find a way to bridge that speculation into a long-lasting path, placing the reader on the verge, just as much as the travelers who remain only partially omniscient of their journey. I knew of Nathaniel Mackey before the class, but I had never truly read his work before. The first book we read as a class was Splay Anthem, and I finished it in a day. Splay Anthem follows the journey of travelers as they both regress and progress. The travelers and their woes and their adventures felt familial and almost heartbreaking as they continued on in cyclical fashion. I say heartbreaking because there seemed to be no end, no form of reparation or conclusion. It made me think of cycles in general, of how people and systems can evolve and move, but somehow travel back to the beginning, back to the initial point. The regression felt negative. Like, how do we always find a way back to just the jumping off point? The travelers felt like my family, my ancestors, myself. We always are on the move, always traveling to something, taking that next step or that next path, getting somewhere higher. That somewhere is unclear, that travel is vague, but we are always on the move, changing things as we go, creating a niche of our own. Yet we end up at the drawing board, restarting the journey again. However, Mackey changes that heartbreak into a hope through giving reverence to that journey, simply because the journey itself is our progress. It is our song that we must keep singing. What is our path if it's not one that constantly evolves and creates in circles? Circles don't have a starting point or an ending point, but rather contain infinite points. And for Mackey, that circling is intentional, a constant verge, a positive. In Song of the Andoumboulou 50, Mackey writes about the travelers. It wasn't wander what we did. We circled. Verge we were driven by. Verge that we wanted. Mackey's writing, especially his serials, will always be a point in the cycle, and each one will continue where the other one leaves off. And that continuity and connectedness, the lineage of the words reflect the lineage and the strength of my ancestors and my family. We are a family that builds from one another, and the very practice in that support is the essential aspect of our nature. It reminded me of listening to jazz music in New Orleans a couple weeks ago, surrounded by people listening to the blares of the trombone and the saxophone, to the consistent sound of the drum, and to the piano, which held the music all together. It was a 45-minute set, but it felt infinite. No music stands, no set list, all improvised. It started with the trombone, and the trombonist began very quiet as the others joined in one singular voice, yet all still distinct. Their set was like waves, up and down in momentum, their music rolling in the small room, but it ended just as it began, with the trombonist, very quiet, with one last breath of sound. His face was trickled with sweat, and once the trombone left his lips, he smiled. They all smiled and nodded to each other. They were in sync. The music was not on page, but in the experience of it all. They traveled somewhere and came back. All songs might have already been sung, but that's not a main concern for the jazz players in Mackey. Mackey writes in Nod House, in the poem Ghost of a Trance, when we hit a wrong note, we said nothing. When we hit the right note, we said, so what? It is not about any end or conclusion, because what you get out of it is the sound, the practice, the experience. The letter writing narrator of From a Broken Bottle in has been summoned, as he tells us, to this sound, to this practice. We in the Writers' House Fellow Seminar, who have read and intensely discussed this work for the past 5 weeks, feel we've been summoned to. And for us, with great excitement and a sense of honor, the journey has led us to Nathaniel Mackey himself, with whom this afternoon we spent 3 hours just talking. And it is with great pleasure that I now get to introduce to you our second 2017 Writers' House Fellow, Nathaniel Mackey.
Thank you, Maya, for a very kind and poignant and expansive and beautiful introduction. Real pleasure to be here. I see old friends and I see some new friends that I made this afternoon. And so it's great. It's a good return. I'm going to read a number of things, poetry and prose. I'm going to begin with a piece from Blue Fasa, the last book of poetry that I published a couple years ago. And actually going to end with another piece from Blue Fasa, but in between we'll go into some other places. The piece that I'll begin with is the first poem in Blue Fasa. As I note in the preface, there's a kind of turn to the east that one sees at the beginning of Blue Fossa, which picks up on a turn to the east that one sees at the end of Nod House. The first section of Blue Fossa is called Rag, as in raga, and the second section is called Rag, as in you know what. Here's a piece inspired by the music of the singer Lakshmi Shankar, A Night in Jaipur. Lakshmi wept as we made our way outward. Blue devotion's annuity looped and led back. Reluctance's allure yet to accrue. Larger than life, they'd lain belly to belly. Patch of hair pressing patch of hair, leg pressing leg. All they'd have otherwise been held in abeyance. Krishna's remnant kiss. Whatever after-the-fact embrace had hold of her, we listened. Bamboo hollow, the heart of it. Bamboo flutes, burnt opening, blown on. Whole, his breath finessed. Flush lozenge, lipped, let go of. Tongue, to have tarried on tongue, less than a memory. Sound, what might have been. Lakshmi wept as we made our way, birth after birth. Two-headed hollow beaten on at both ends. Log we slept in. Mirrors, amanuenses. Mud, bouquet. Sat gameless at the gaming table. Sitar glint, knuckling the knights, one luster. Spoke sputter, made sputter speak. A diffuse kiss, low to the ground, blue reconnoiter. Voice, also known as Rack Tavern. Bar, be my altar, it sang. Simi sang, Simi wept, Lakshmi's bond, an abatement. Held but not had, held, churchical girth, caught strings, cut our thumbs. Insofar as there was an I, it wasn't hers, we heard her insinuate. Of late begun to be elsewhere, the late one she'd one day be. Simi sang, Simi wept as we sat lost at the gaming table. Thumbs, all thumbs, no thumbs to hold on with. Held, not had, was her new way, what had its way with us. Held, not had, her numb regret. Lakshmi sang as we sat stuck at the gaming table, hands tied down by sympathetic strings. To be was to be at her behest. Sought bodily solace, bodilessness, reluctant allure, it seemed. A certain way she had with Krishna's going, beautiful rebuff she made it seem. We'd been born by a wind we hardly knew was blowing, rung notes lingering moment to moment, phonic perfume, it seemed. Seemed it said cover, seemed it said collect, seemed it bid reaching goodbye, went on reaching, seemed it told all it said, no. We sat aloft, looking in on ourselves. 5 layers we'd have to get through to get to what lay underneath. A low hum came from under the gaming table. Chances debt reneged on. Romance's bet called off. This is a poem I'd like to read in memory of Derek Walcott, who, as you probably know, passed away a few days ago. It's a poem that I wrote for Romare Bearden. There's a book that's coming out in a few months, edited by Kwame Dawes and Matthew Shinoda, called Bearden's Odyssey, Poets Responding to the Art of Romare Bearden. And the introduction is actually written by Derek Walcott, which is appropriate because that overlay of Greek antiquity and Black diasporic modernities and contemporaneities is a gesture that that Walcott and Bearden share. Those of us who responded to the call were sent reproductions of some work that Bearden did in his I guess you'd call it his Black Odysseus series, scenes from the Odyssey and the Iliad. And of course, one of the immediately striking things about those pieces is that the Greeks are black, which gave rise to a lot of responses in me, this blackening of the Greeks. It recalled, recalled the various alternative histories that you find in black historians like Sheikh Anta Diop and John J. Jackson, Chancellor Williams, Martin Bernal. Bernal wrote a book called Stolen Legacy. And all these black historians, no, it was actually George James who wrote Stolen Legacy, but all these black historians talk about the debt to Egypt, an ancient black Egypt that the Greek civilization owed. And so that brought me into thinking about what might have been on Bearden's mind. Perhaps that tradition of black historiography, taking the Greeks back to Egypt, and an African Egypt, not an Egypt understood as a suburb of Berlin, as Ishmael Reed accused the Egyptologists of the 19th and 20th century of foisting on us. So I thought of that. I thought of H.D.'s work, Helen in Egypt, where where Egypt seems to be a more real. The Helen who was in Troy was a phantom. So the Greeks seem to have been under some kind of bewitchment. They fought this war for a phantom, and maybe all wars are fought for a phantom. So that was working on me, and then this thing. Bearden has this stuff going on through the pieces where he has this very stylized way, but a kind of offhand stylized, kind of pointedly offhand stylization of fire, where it's just kind of like that. But it's a particular color of red or tone of red that reminded me of a rooster's comb. And the roosters, of course, and their combs have a very prominent and important place in African voodoo and in New World African hoodoo and voodoo. So this idea that the Greeks were under some kind of bewitchment made for an interesting intersection between Stesichorus, who H.D. gets her idea that Helen was really in Egypt, between that and African American hoodoo. So I couldn't help myself. But all this stuff, Martin Bernal's Black Athena, which came out, I think, in the 80s, really continues the work done by those black historians that I've named. And in fact, he acknowledges them quite rightly. So anyway, that's some of the stuff here. You'll hear a reference to a black torso. That's echoing a flamenco singer, Manuel Torre, who was very important in the formulation of Garcia Lorca's ideas of duende in flamenco. And asked to talk about duende, Torre says that what you must search for and find is the black torso of the pharaoh. Going back to fabled origins in Egypt for the gypsies, but again insisting that the Egyptians were in fact an African people, the black torso of the pharaoh. So this continues Mu, and this is Mu 109th part. It's called Departure from Troy, and we have these voyagers, this lost tribe known as We, that is moving through various points in time and space. So it was we came to red sky country. Flame red were flame red, blood red. Stylized fire flared everywhere. Red flame, watercolor brush tip, brush blood mixed with water. Rumor had it we were in Troy, leaving Troy. Stylized boats we shoved off in. Sketchical fire, blasé sun. Odyssean drift had hold of us. We thought we were in Spain. Red, that I want you red, we sang. Circe's red couch and rug to be come to. Blasé suns, why not? We looked at the sky. We wondered, why red? The Greeks were back in Egypt, and we were them. We had our pharaonic beards on, black torso, throat, tongue. Red, that I want you red, we sang as we rode. Rooster comb red, wondering why. Rooster comb red, we took to mean wake up, wore the big news, no news. So it was, or so we'd have it, we the late exegetes, we who'd been at it from back when. Rooster comb fire made shades of us, we the blutopic acolytes. Cartoon flames our friend, it seemed it said. Cartoon, what condolence there'd be. Egypt's outward mounting flare it might have been. Rooster comb red nipped our backs as we had it up. The sky splotched red with a petro paintbrush, horsehairs left in a bowl of rainwater, said to have been a snake-headed brush. It was after the end of the war, but the war was everywhere. Rooster comb red, the color it all was. Red what so bewitched us. Red was our delight. Wake up, it seemed it said. We never left. We were never there. Red meant we were meaning to leave. War droned on. We nodded off. We dreamt roosters milled around us. The combs on their heads came off. Fire popped out of corners, crevices, cracks. Red, that I want you red, we sang. Sad gallery, rode as we sang. Come to where red was all there was. Rooster comb red enchantment. Phantom Troy, we were never there. Hair of the horse we hid inside. Horse we made ashes of. Phantom Troy, with we ourselves phantoms. To depart was to have never been there. Spooks, boat lifted in from Amentet, we were gone again. There before we knew it, known only as we were gone. A catechistic baton, a stesachoric brush had our backs. The Greeks had never been there. There the North African Antilles, brush, blood water, blood siphoning water. To depart was to have not been there. Blue, green and gray, blue, green and lavender, the change in the sea, red's work. The change in the sea was us leaving. Roosters crowed all day. Red watercolor smoke it was, filled up the sky, a flood of memory it seemed. Air we laid siege to, air we let go, upstart wind across an ibis's neck, air's anabatic blush. We were Africans in Greek disguise again, Greeks with a new paint job. Circe's old enchantment and even older nonsonance see through roust and redress. Red wasn't appealing to what we knew for ratification. Red was telling us what we knew. A slow motion glass cascade, broken glass, imminent bout of tears held back. Brooding the future, bearded eldrins, inequational redoubt, regret begun to be touched by light. Sun Ra showed up as we shoved off. Uroy showed up, red-soaked paper, the annuities of autumn. Sun's why nots, what next? Iroy showed up. The Overghost Orchestra blared in back of us, had our backs. rooster-comb sonnets whose bite was astro-black, rasp a galactic static, sunspot boast our dispatch. A cataclysmic baton tapped us on the backs of our necks. The change in the sea was us taking off. Taking leave, we tore loose, planetary debris, planetary drift. Mu, we might have been, Earth opening up. We left, we put pharaonic beards on. It wasn't Spain we were in, though we sang like gypsies, the pharaoh's black torso roughening our throats, red that we wanted, the red of the rooster's comb, rue waking up though we did. We were black Orpheuses, black Odysseans. We were trying to get home, trying to make heaven home. Home had a way of burning, was red's awakening. Home, not home anymore. A kind of contained raving came over us. We took our tongues out and threw them. We talked all out of our heads. Where eros began to be touched by elegy, anaphrastic splotch, pox red. Gee. I always plan to read much more than I have time for. It was great. I read with Henry Grimes the other night in New York, and I put together this stretch of a weave of poems and excerpts from the new prose book, Late Arcade, and I printed it out, and it came to 66 pages. We got to page 26, and even at that, we went over the allotted time. So that old blues line, "Don't get me started," I use that a lot. Gee. So where are we? I started 15 minutes. Okay, I'm trying to take the long view and, just figure out, do I have time for these intermediate steps? Let me read a poem that's in a book called Djbot, which will be the first volume in the set of 3 that I'm working on. And this is a poem in the Mu series, 118th part it is. And it's called As If It Were This Is Our Music. And some of you will recognize that that's a meeting of 2 titles very important to free jazz. Ornette Coleman's album, This Is Our Music, and Joseph Jarman's As If It Were the Season. As if it were, this is our music. So this traveling we that roves through these poems sometimes sounds like a traveling band with some affinity to the band in From a Broken Bottle. And the sort of thinking about what it means to form a band or be a band will come up from time to time. But they too hit the road a lot. Heaved our bags and headed out again. Again, the ground that was to have been there wasn't. Bits of ripcord crowded the box my head had become. The sense we were a band was back. The sense we were a band or in a band. The rotating gate time turned out to be creaked. We pulled away. Lord Invader's reform school band it was we were in. The pseudo-Dionysian fife corps. The Movian wind extet. The sense we were a band or were in a band had come back. Names wicked sense we called timbre. Numbers crooked sense our bequest. Clasp it teetered near to, abstraction. Band was what to be there was. Band was what it was to be there, we shouted. Band all we thought it would be. Band was a chant, that we chanted. What we chanted. Chant said it all would be all right. A new band, our new name, was the Abandoned Ones, no surprise. We dwelt in the well-being that awaited us, never not sure we'd get there, what way we were yet to know. I stood pat a rickety 66, tapped out a scarecrow jig in waltz time, big toe, blunt inside my shoe. Who was I to so rhapsodize? I chided myself. Who to so mark myself, chill teeth suddenly forming, reforming? Who to let my heart out so? To be at odds with myself resounded. Sound's own city, the wall I hit my head against. Polis was to be, and to be, so hit. We heard clamor, clash, blue consonants, noises, low sibling sense. We pumped our arms as though they were pistons, elbows in and out. We nicked our name to abandon. Abandon was our name now. Thus was our music no music. Music, too, we left behind. Everything beside the point, that there was no point. Everything, thus, the point. Thus was being there, sibling sense, gone treble, the balm to be a band, the true amenity music was, the fact of having been there, new to its Buddha nature, the fact of having been there, moot. To have been there wasn't Dasein. No Heidegger, told my horse. Trussed up to the side it sat, pressed and preponderant, sovereign, self-contained, word music, the music we sloughed. Slipped accompaniment, surrogate cloud, rapt adjournment, adjutant, surrogate cue. I kept clear of it, caught up at arm's length, all but caught out, I came to see. Thus was our music no music, it seemed, I said. Music more than music, I might have said, might as well have said, no matter I mumbled otherwise under my breath. The Freedmen's Debate Society, our name now was, the ox-tongue speaker exchange, fractal scratch, nominative serration, cutaway run, cutaway arrest. Thus was our music no music, I did say, say's default on sing, such as it was. We called it history, even so, insisted it, the it crowding the corner of everyone's eye. None of us were not crept up on, none not required we sing it, say it. Thus was our say, not so. Beginning again, for the multeenth time, we counted off. It was our multeenth breakdown, multeenth new beginning. Brass rubbed off on our lips, reed rubbed off as well. String steel left on our fingertips, stick wood left on our thumbs. So we're going to segue from that band to my prose band. Late Arcade is the fifth volume in an ongoing serial epistolary fiction that's set now back in the 80s, early 80s, a band based in Los Angeles, now known as Molimo Matet. It used to be called the Mystic Horn Society. And so the books are comprised of letters written by N, who's a member of the band, who's a composer, multi-instrumentalist, and he addresses them to an angel, angel of dust. And I'm going to read one, maybe two, but certainly one. And this is one where it's in 1984, and the band goes to Detroit to play a gig. And N, who, as they used to say, is a man of parts, not only plays music and writes these letters, but he thinks a lot. He looks out at things and he reflects. He reflects on the world. We don't often think of jazz musicians as doing that, or we didn't used to. But hopefully that, well, in some parts that has changed. And that's the part I'm in. Dear Angel of Dust, we're in Detroit, got here around noon after an early flight from LA. It's the first time in Detroit for all of us. After getting settled in the hotel and resting up a while, we went out to take a look, see, as Rasan would say, what we could see. We walked around quite a bit and took the bus for longer distances, anxious to see all we could. It's hard to say, hard to sum up what it all adds up to. Could it be said to add up to anything? What it was random vantages, random veils, no such disclosure as we think of first-time exposure to a city might yield. Detroit was there, but not there. Or was it we were there, but not there? Vantage indissociable from veil, red-eyed as we were. I quickly found the expectation to see and say something about Detroit an irritant, any summing up or desire to sum up an affront. Yes, the monumental architecture seems to cry out for comment. The massive, no-nonsense rectilinearity of the General Motors building, bent on eliciting reverence or ridicule. Penguin went so far as to call it their new Parthenon. The contrast between that blatant acclaim on eternity and the auto industry's recent troubles makes cultural critics of us all. Not to mention the charred, burnt-out neighborhoods, the abandoned houses overtaken by vines and other growth, the naked foundations, the empty lots. Yes, that all the more obvious contrast would appear to put words in our mouths, easy words, moreover, no matter how stark what they report. Yes, them that's got, mostly white, mostly keep getting, while them that's not, mostly black, mostly don't. This is axiomatic American cud we could chew for days, and do chew, chewing or not. We strolled at one point up Woodward Avenue over to the Detroit Institute of Arts, where we'll be playing. It was beautiful, quite the promenade, with lovely buildings on both sides of the street, the Institute perhaps the loveliest of them. But likewise, once inside, yes, the huge Diego Rivera frescoes, the homage to industrial Detroit he painted in the early 30s, all but jumped out and took hold of one's tongue, tempting one to wax on about a discrepant relation to what one saw outside. The contrast between epic, heroic dimension and post-industrial diminution came easily to one's lips. Too easily, all too easily, I thought. I found myself resisting the very observations I'd have made, something about them seeming too pat, too obvious perhaps. I had the sense there was an opaque Detroit, a recondite Detroit, a secret Detroit such observations don't even scratch the surface of. I bit my tongue. It's not that any of that isn't true, not that easy sociologizing isn't true, probably more true the easier it is. Not that that may not be the job society does. It's not that it's not true, but that everyone already knows it and is maybe at some level okay with it. What, I was asking myself, does waxing on or waxing at all about it mean or do? Meanwhile, all the musicians that have come out of here and all the music that's come out of here are really staggering, really, as we like to say, saying something. If I named Howard McGee, Tommy Flanagan, Betty Carter, Jerry Allen, the Jones brothers, Elvin, Hank, and Thad, Yusef Lateef, Julius Watkins, Ron Carter, Milt Jackson, Paul Chambers, Barry Harris, Louis Hayes, Alice Coltrane, Pepper Adams, Kenny Burrell, Donald Byrd, Lucky Thompson, Charles McPherson, Lonnie Hillier, Sippy Wallace, Hugh Lawson, Frank Foster, Sonny Stitt, and J.R. Montrose, I'd just be getting started. Even without getting into gospel folk like Reverend C.L. Franklin, blues folk like John Lee Hooker, R&B folk like Aretha Franklin and George Clinton, rock and roll folk like Hank Ballard and Bill Haley, pop folk, Motown, etc. At the same time, I both care and don't care that they came from here. Music is always elsewhere. After DIA, we took a bus down Woodward to go to Greektown. At one of the stops, a man who I'd say was in his mid-60s got on. He was wearing a rumpled brown suit that had seen better days, a white shirt that could have used washing, and dress shoes that were run down at the heels. His hair was an unkempt salt and pepper afro, matted down on one side from having been slept on, it looked like, his chin and jaws covered with salt and pepper stubble in need of a shave. He headed for the back of the bus after getting on, muttering something under his breath and making a point of looking at each passenger he passed. His eyes were bloodshot, and one could smell that he'd been drinking. But he had a kind of elegance about him all the same. No matter his legs were a little shaky, and he bumped against the edges of the seat backs as he made his way down the aisle. He gave off the sense that, like his suit, he'd seen better days. After he and the other new passengers were seated and the bus began to roll again, one heard, coming from the back of the bus, his muttering slowly gained volume, reaching the point where one heard him say, a bit slurred, but loud and quite intelligibly, "None of y'all don't know nothing about this." He repeated this again and again, pausing between repetitions as if to let it sink in throughout the bus, or even perhaps to assess and be newly schooled by it himself. "None of y'all don't know nothing about this," he said again and again, his voice raspy, gruff, burning like whiskey. The rest of us turned to look toward the back of the bus, one or two at first, and then more and more of us, all of us eventually staring at him as he continued to announce, "None of y'all don't know nothing about this." Every now and then he phrased it, "Don't none of y'all know nothing about this." He sat alone on the back seat of the bus, dead center, head up, back surprisingly straight given the wobbliness of his walk down the aisle, feet planted flatly and solidly on the floor, legs a little akimbo, hands on his knees. He stared back at us, panning the bus, intent on making eye contact with each and every one of us, it seemed. Something of a taunt, a challenge, a dare in the look he gave us. "None of y'all don't know nothing about this," he kept insisting. Sometimes, "Don't none of y'all know nothing about this." It never became clear what he meant by this. Whether it referred to his condition in some micro or macro way, his tipsiness or his general disrepair, respectively, to a more general state of affairs, to life itself, or to who knows what. But his vehemence, if nothing else, communicated. His adamance, if nothing else, had a kind of articulateness. The direness or the extremity from which he spoke was affecting and true. The dead are dying of thirst, I thought, figuring him as a drunken Dogon elder, chiding us for negligence or disrespect, for having fallen arrears on dues or debts owed the dead, owed history, a breach of ritual observance, ritual recall. It struck me that this was nothing if not the entire edifice, possession built on and put in place by dispossession, the disrepair of the socially dead. I thought this, and I saw it all in a snap, a flash, but no matter the truth of it, the historical and present-day relevance or resonance of it, I almost immediately lost patience with myself, guilty as I was of a deeper negligence, a deep non-observance of the hidden in plain sight right we were being offered, the initiation into not knowing the man in the rumpled suit invited us to. The simple fact was that he was right. We didn't know. We didn't know who he was. We didn't know what this was. All we knew was that he was announcing we didn't know. accusing us of thinking we knew, but not knowing. None of y'all don't know nothing about this, he declared again and again. Everyone in the bus looked at him for a while, a long while. The bus driver glanced up at the rearview mirror from time to time, checking out what was going on in back. It had started off with everyone being a little on edge, wondering what this would lead to, apprehensive as to what it would lead to. But after a while, it seemed pretty clear that his mania, if mania was what it was, consisted solely of confronting us verbally and with his bloodshot gaze, that the always possible threat of violence didn't apply. He kept to his own space, clearly defined in the middle of the backseat of the bus, and his hands never left his knees. No flailing of arms, no gesticulation, not so much as waving a finger. What little violence there was, if it can even be called that, was confined to his face, a grimacing wince it got from time to time as he registered the effort it took to apprise us of our not knowing, a certain exasperation, bordering on exhaustion it seemed, with having to do this, with our not knowing, and with our not knowing we didn't know. Once it was established that he was no danger, that he posed no threat, everyone in the bus relaxed. Everyone eventually turned away from staring at him and went back to what they'd been doing before. Jeanette, Lambert, Penguin, Aunt Nancy, Jamila, and I all looked at each other and rolled our eyes. There was a group of teenagers nearby who covered their mouths and giggled. The man in the brown suit, unfazed by no longer having everyone's attention, continued his tirade, his rant, his appraisal of our not knowing. None of y'all don't know nothing about this. After a while, it simply blended in, background noise, of a piece with the conversations going on in the bus, traffic noise from outside and whatever else came into earshot. At the fourth stop, he stood up, went back to muttering, made his way shakily up the aisle, and got off the bus. I have to admit I found myself a little shaken, no matter nothing untoward had broken out. It wasn't even the possibility of violence so much as that somehow I felt singled out. He didn't look my way any more than anyone else's while he spoke, and when he did make eye contact with me, he didn't linger as if it were especially me his words were intended for. The fact that what he said, what he kept insisting, what he kept repeating, agreed so much with the way I'd been thinking, the random vantage being the random veil, is what shook me. It seemed he spoke from some unreachably occult place, a cautionary voice after my own heart, chastening and affirming me at the same time. There are other things I could go into about our first day in Phantom Detroit, but I won't. We ended up leaving a diner last night, for example, when the waitress told Lambert he'd have to remove his skull cap, the kufi he was wearing. No way was that going to happen. We all just got up and left without exchanging a single word. We just glanced at each other and got up and left. I'll try writing again while we're here. Our gig's tomorrow night, as ever, in. Okay, where are we in time? Okay, I'll read two more poems. A short poem from a recent chapbook called Lay Ghost, and then return to Blue Fasa, and read one last poem, one coming from there. This is Song of the Andoumboulou, 166 and a half. It's a shorty by the standard of the Song of the Andoumboulou. It's 2.5 pages in this chapbook, but this is a point where the migrating they spend some time in a place called the Stick City Ashram, and they do some meditation and yoga and all that stuff. They try to raise their consciousness. And the speaker in this one finds himself thinking about words and thinking about economics. And he coins a word, which is the first word that is the first word of the poem. Decapitism stuck to the end of my tongue. What to do but call it names, I thought. It wasn't thought I was thinking, I'd have answered had I been asked. Not even thinking, I thought. I sat brooding, tracking a feather's drop, plummet my lush regard. I sat brooding, hen's heat yogic, so bent my hickory legs were, hickory stiff, transcendent, so flexed it was. So it will have been said, absent-mindedly rolled off my tongue. Least thought, last thought, I mocked, made believe I believed. Prophet shot and cast off, tread. Prophetry rolled off as well. Jelly-coated pill I bit. Bitterness read with it, or might as well have, quartet's broken jaw. Change was the law, I sat reflecting. Right foot nested on my left inner thigh. Left leg pointed straight ahead. I sat, Buddhistic hurdler, musing, mouth open, ipseities arrayed in a row. I sat, I was thinking thoughts, province receded, beauty's provocation revoked as our loins contracted. Itamar, Annuncio, all us men. Tantric hoist, I was thinking, thoughts adumbration, what ached and what resigned itself, displaced. We sat checking out the yogis in leotards, Aja, Eleanor, Annuncia, Sophia, every womanly wisp under the sun. I dreamt again we were away with no way home, this or that plane waiting, this or that takeoff missed, sweet crease loaded with ore, but to be absconded with, gold we'd have otherwise been. Bent intonation intervened, a reed off away in the distance. Netzinet's name I no sooner gave than was taken back. Brother B's wild ox moan. I sat dejected, thought's appointment missed, disappointed. Abscondities, eviscerate redoubt. I was thinking thought had yet to begin. Thought's far emblem, a star too frail for sight. Leotarded crux and curvatures, ignition. Thoughts do advent, I thought no such arrival. What comeliness it wore thin. No ideas but in them, I thought. Cloak and connivance, the lords of that house. Abode we abided by. Okay. I'd like to have Hannah Judd come to the stage. Hannah is, okay. Hannah, let me see. I think this is fine, yeah. Okay, okay. Now I think we got it. Okay.
You can tilt the mic at the end too, I think.
Yeah, if you do it this way. Okay. Hannah Judd is, Hannah's one of my new friends. We made friends this afternoon during the seminar, actually before the seminar, and I found out that she plays music, she plays cello, and I asked her if she would mind joining me for a poem tonight, so she agreed to that, and so we're going to finish with this poem in Blue Fasa, which is an etude a series of etudes. Andoumboulou was etudes, a genre that only I work in. Kind of got that market covered. It's called Beginning We, the Migrating They. And we, the migrating they, is in quotes. Beginning we, the migrating they. We, the migrating they, we instigated, those in whose name we went. To get where they were going and lie down was all we wanted. Love's choric voices convening, caroling home. Home exploded long since. It was up and be gone again. Crab shell taken for sun where there was no sun. Without or about hope, no one could say. We, the migrating they, we stared out at. Prodigal wish to burn elsewhere, intransigent. Stella's high skylight, were Stella suddenly one of us? She the one who said, move on. They were not the dead, but dolls of the dead. A dream of coming back as we were going. Eyes wide, but eyes nothing looked out from. Effigies adrift in the dark. A parsed pomp and circumstance it was, not being there, but the image of being there, what they were caught in. Leg lag, retreat, emic advance. Inside the bubble, the house became, we saw each awake one. Puffed up ascendance, all there was of coming back. An effigy of each, if not each its own effigy, each an unlikely remit. Everyone, someone we knew. Resemblance mocked us. Faces doll hard, clavicles crossed. Each with a big mouth, telling on everyone what so-and-so did, what so-and-so thought. Who they otherwise were, we fell away from. Equate their going with our going, though we did. Who they were, they otherwise were. The away, what there was of it still. Going. We, the migrating they said, come see. Lean though we did and look, sort of see. Night sky, no less remote. They were the stars, we the stars' understudies. Night's love, love's lit recompense. Night's far-fetch, a black well dipped into. Horns bells, burrowing in. Would-be recompense, isthmic largesse. Far-flung, as if all touched other. We their press outward unimpelled. They the open sea, and we the raft I clung to. Left leg scissored by hers, we lay ensconced. We within the we, they elicited, ours newly raveling out. Not to be attached, we told ourselves. Ratchetless advance we'd come abreast of, lip to inquisitive lip, tongue to ingenuous tongue. Lifted otherwise was no matter. We drew back, we's rummaging they let go. An exercise in touch it turned out to be. We there would be stand-in, pre, post, pan-pronominal consort. To see ourselves, we set ourselves adrift. Curve and declivity, protuberant hip, imminent ether, astral dispatch. They, light's arrivals, delay. We there someday stand in. Ages we took to reach them, we, the migrating they. That they were roots in the sky, moving's muse insisted. Star flux, far star, far fix. We, the migrating they, their studies in touch. Stand to their step, a studied pass, we stood. Studies inasmuch as we were steps, we stood. Studies, we ran in place. Stood what they'd have called pat, we called ready. Poised on a brink, we saw fall back. Stood, we wanted to say what chance there was were chance in doubt. Step stands recondite flicker. Step stands tonic duress. Blue Fasa came in from a distance, a version no one had yet heard. Step some indigenous drift it turned out, led to export stay. Stella's mandate notwithstanding, in wanting what would not be there. It wasn't music, but a stepped abscondity, a music before music's compromise. Stand resisted step, step stand, moot martyrdom, strides true marriage, Fasa, Itamar, and Stella's vow. A step in consequence it might have been, automatic etude, steps new nonchalance. They, the migrating they, the step we took. Step, the stand we took. Step, we wanted to say, stood in stay's way. It was the old and new school we were enrolled in. Syllabic devotion recalling ball, Bengali, kaval. Scat Academy grads though we were, we bit our tongues. Beat back say's excess. They, the migrating we, were automatic. Steps, expected star, so imminent a winding stairway it was, we were on. School of tangency, glancing contact, blase stasis, pretend impasse. Never not to have gone, but be going, a stepped incumbency. Steps evacuated finality, finalities evacuated fit. We, the migrating they, translated. Draft meant drift, meant scheme, meant sketch. We, the migrating they, were back in school. Steps inclined toward stride, we stood instructed. There's the advance we were learning. Rotes, automata, railed we were bound by, scraped as we verged outward. We, the magnetic they turned out to be. Step fell away the longer we lasted, collapsed or contrived itself anew. There was a rail one stood at, stuck where one stood, caught by Stella's backsides the way she went forward, celestial mechanics, cosmic romp. Itamar called it astral, heavenly. Chant the names of God, we were told. Itamar, Stella, scrape, caress, careen. Crab, sun, bell ad infinitum. A work in certitude it seemed, albeit abounding. Insist, I do believe, though we did. Scrape, caress, careen, crab, sun were all names. Bell, another name, they went on and on. Stride, bubble, rummage, a rut we were caught in, ran only running in place. Rotating stations we worked our way loose from, effigy, skylight, scat. Ran as though pedaling, knees at one's chin. Curve, doll, declivity, lip, leg, star. Name after name, sang change, rang changes. God's need not to be still. String the names as one, we were told, one without need of us, though they were. We the migrating, they again going. Raft, root, tangency, touch. A studied sputter, spin, step taken up. Ratcheted, not less ratchetless. Fix, dip, flicker, brink, stairway, step. Hannah Judd.
Once again, Hannah Judd with Nathaniel Mackey.
That's great.
We have a number of Nate's books available in the back, and Nate will be right here for a little while to inscribe your copies if you would like. We also have broadsides, and we're not charging anything for the broadsides, so get them, and I'm sure Nate will sign those as well. Tomorrow morning, we're back at 10 o'clock for a brunch and 10:30 for an exact 1-hour conversation with Nate. And we hope you'll come and ask questions. This is part of a program that we all spend all year waiting for. And Nathaniel Mackey's presence as a Writers House Fellow has just graced us today, and we're so happy that Philadelphians are able to come and join us. So one more time, Nate, thank you very much. Nathaniel Mackey.